The world knew Jude Banko as the golden boy of Nigerian tech. His face graced the covers of magazines, his name echoed in investor meetings from Lagos to Silicon Valley, and his apps shaped the way millions lived their lives. But under the sharp suit and keynote speeches, Jude was drowning. Success had come fast, faster than he had time to process. Endless interviews, betrayals by friends turned sycophants, and a recent scandal involving a disgruntled business partner had left him jaded and exhausted. His insomnia had worsened. His creativity had stalled. He wanted silence, obscurity, peace. And that was how he ended up in Ayatoro, a quiet village tucked far away from the electric pace of the city. He arrived under the cover of dawn, driving himself for the first time in years, a duffel bag in the back seat and an alias ready, turned. He wore a faded cap, his beard grown deliberately wild. The villagers barely gave him a second glance, just another traveler, maybe a teacher or an NGO worker. That was exactly what he wanted. He rented a modest bungalow on the edge of town, with a view of lush hills and the sounds of goats and morning birds. There was no Wi-Fi, no mobile signal worth anything, and no urgent calendar alerts. The dusty roads and handwritten signboards reminded him of a different life, one he had never lived, but suddenly longed for. As he stood on the veranda that first morning, a strange sound drifted through the trees. A steady beat, raw, powerful, ancient. A drum. He couldn't see where it was coming from, but something in it called to him. It wasn't just rhythm. It was a message. A vibration that stirred something long buried. He closed his eyes and felt it, not with his ears, but with his chest. His heart had started listening. Jude spent the next few days adjusting to life in Ayatoro. He shopped at the local market where the tomatoes were shaped oddly but tasted divine. He drank water from a clay pot that chilled it better than any smart fridge could. The villagers were kind, though reserved. They didn't ask many questions, and for once, Jude didn't offer answers. Each evening, after the sun dipped behind the hills, the rhythm returned. The same hypnotic beat pulsed through the air, weaving its way between the houses, through the trees, into his soul. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful, steady, emotional, unlike anything he'd ever heard before. He began to crave it. He sat quietly in the evenings, eyes closed, just to feel the beat resonate through him. There was sadness in it, yes, but also joy. Freedom. It was as if the drummer was speaking in a language older than words. One night, driven by impulse, he followed the sound. Through narrow footpaths and rustling bushes, he crept like a boy chasing a secret. The closer he got, the stronger the beat became. Until finally, in a clearing under a sky freckled with stars, he saw her. She sat on a wooden stool, surrounded by children and a few adults, her fingers moving swiftly across the stretched hide of a drum. Her eyes were closed, head tilted slightly, lost in the music she was making. She was young, mid-20s, maybe, with intricately braided hair and a red scarf tied around her waist. The children clapped and danced, their laughter rising like incense. And then Jude noticed something strange. She didn't respond when a little boy tugged her sleeve until she turned to look. That was when he realized she hadn't heard the child. The drummer was deaf. Jude stood frozen in the shadows, watching the drummer. She played with such confidence, her hands telling stories in beats and pauses. It baffled him. How could someone who couldn't hear create something so rich with feeling, with life? When the music stopped, the children clapped, and the woman smiled, a soft, proud smile that lit up her whole face. Then she raised her hands and signed something. The children responded eagerly with gestures, laughter, and nods. Jude didn't understand a word, but it was clear, this woman communicated with more grace than most people he'd met in boardrooms. He returned home that night with a mind full of questions. Who was she? How did she learn to drum? Was she born deaf or did it come later? He tried to sleep, but her image stayed with him, her quiet authority, the way the community respected her, the beat that still echoed in his chest. The next morning, he walked to the marketplace and asked the plantain seller about her. The woman squinted. "You mean Lola? The deaf girl with the drum?" Jude nodded. "Oh, that one. Her drum talks more than her mouth. She's a gift to this village, I swear. Her mother died some years ago. Only child. She teaches the children drumming after school, keeps them off trouble." Jude bought his items and thanked the seller. Lola. Even her name had rhythm. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to her, not out of pity, but curiosity. There was something in her silence that made more sense than all the noise he had left behind. Something pure. Something real. He had come to Ayatoro to hide. But now, something, or someone, was calling him to wake up. The next evening, Jude returned to the clearing where he had first seen her. He arrived early, settling on a stone at the edge of the gathering. Lola was already there, setting up her drum. She didn't notice him at first, her focus was absolute, every movement deliberate. As the children trickled in, they greeted her with hugs and hand signs, the kind of affection that spoke of routine and trust. Jude watched silently, unsure how to approach her. What would he say? How did one introduce himself to someone who couldn't hear him? Eventually, their eyes met. For a split second, her expression stiffened. She tilted her head, studying him, this stranger in dusty jeans and a cap pulled too low. Jude gave a small wave and nodded respectfully. She nodded back but said nothing. Then she turned and began to play. The children gathered around her, clapping in rhythm as she struck the drum with swift, practiced hands. This time, Jude didn't just listen, he felt it. He let the music wash over him, each beat like a breath he hadn't taken in years. After the session ended, he lingered. The children dispersed, and she began to pack up. He walked toward her slowly, hands out in a gesture of peace. He pointed to himself and said, "Turned." Then, remembering, he pulled out a pen and small notepad from his pocket, an old habit from brainstorming days, and wrote, "Your drumming is beautiful." "Thank you." He tore out the page and handed it to her. Lola read it, eyes scanning the words carefully. A small smile broke across her face. She looked up, nodded, and then took the pen. On the back of the note, she wrote one word, Lola. In the days that followed, Jude found himself drawn back to the clearing again and again. He came early, always with his notepad in hand, always staying after the children left. Lola remained wary at first, her interactions limited to nods and brief notes. But little by little, a rhythm began to form between them, silent but meaningful. They communicated through scribbled sentences, smiles, and gestures. He asked her questions about drumming, and she answered patiently, drawing sketches of beats and rhythm patterns, sometimes tapping them out on wooden benches for him to feel. Jude began to understand her world, not through sympathy, but through wonder. She described, in writing, how she felt vibrations through her feet and chest, how rhythm lived in her skin, not her ears. "Drums are loud enough for the soul," she once wrote, tapping her chest with her palm. Jude had spent years developing technology that connected people, but here was Lola, connecting people in ways no device could ever replicate. One evening, after the lesson ended and the children had gone, Lola handed him a small talking drum. She patted the seat beside her and gestured for him to sit. He hesitated, amused. "I've never played a drum in my life," he wrote quickly. She smirked and responded on paper, "Everyone has a beat. You just forgot yours." That night, under a slowly darkening sky, Lola taught Jude how to drum. She tapped a pattern and had him repeat it, correcting him with gentle claps or a shake of the head. He stumbled at first, laughing quietly, but slowly, his hands began to move with purpose. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And as he watched her nod in approval, he felt something he hadn't in a long time, joy, unfiltered and pure. The village began to take notice of the quiet stranger who lingered around Lola. Whispers rose in the market and under mango trees, curious murmurs about the man with the city gate who drummed like a newborn goat but smiled like he belonged. Jude heard the gossip, but it didn't bother him. He had come to disappear, yet somehow he was becoming more present than he'd been in years. One morning, Lola invited him to the school compound where she volunteered. The buildings were simple, corrugated roofs, sun-baked walls, and chalkboards barely holding on. Yet the space felt alive. The children lit up when they saw her, swarming her with greetings in sign and laughter. Jude followed quietly, observing how effortlessly she engaged them. She wasn't just their teacher, she was their friend, protector, and spark. In a corner, a girl no older than 8 was practicing rhythms with pebbles on a wooden bench, mimicking Lola's movements. Jude smiled. Lola wasn't just making music. She was making legacy. After the visit, they sat under a tree near a quiet stream. Lola scribbled something and passed the notepad to him. "Why did you really come here?" Jude stared at the words, the question more piercing than any he had been asked in years. He hesitated, then wrote, "I needed silence. I was drowning in noise I didn't trust anymore." She nodded thoughtfully, then took the pen again. "Funny," she wrote. "You came for silence but found rhythm." She drew a small drum next to her words, then underlined it twice. Jude chuckled and looked at her. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, not as Jude the tech mogul, not as a name behind headlines, but as a man simply rediscovering his own heartbeat. As the weeks rolled by, Jude settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for quiet walks through cassava farms and long conversations, mostly written, with Lola. Afternoons were spent helping at the school or reading books he never had time for back in Lagos. And in the evenings, he drummed. Not always with skill, but always with heart. For the first time since building his tech empire, Jude felt like he wasn't producing, he was simply being. And that, he realized, was a different kind of success. But peace has a way of making room for old memories. One cloudy afternoon, as he walked alone past an abandoned cocoa shed, he stumbled across a boy tapping a plastic bucket with sticks. The rhythm was shaky but full of intent. Jude smiled and crouched beside him. "You like drums?" he asked softly, forgetting for a moment that he wasn't turned to everyone. The boy nodded enthusiastically. "I want to play like Lola. But Papa says it's useless noise." Jude sat beside him, letting the boy continue. The child's small hands reminded him of his own as a boy, hungry to create, constantly building things out of broken radios and scrap metal. His father had never understood that part of him, had told him to chase something real. Only his mother had seen his passion as a gift. The memory of her returned like a wave, her warm hands on his cheek, her voice saying, "Follow the beat inside you, my son." He taught the boy a simple pattern, then patted him on the shoulder before walking back toward the village. That night, when Lola saw him, she noticed his eyes were distant. She signed a question, but he only shook his head and smiled faintly. Some rhythms, he realized, weren't just heard, they were remembered. That evening, the air in Ayatoro was soft with humidity, and fireflies blinked lazily above the fields. Jude sat beside Lola under their usual tree near the stream, both of them barefoot, the world hushed except for crickets and the occasional croak from a distant frog. She handed him the drum, but he didn't reach for it this time. Instead, he handed her the notepad, already filled with his uneven handwriting. "Lola, may I ask you something personal?" She looked at him, raised an eyebrow, then nodded once. "Were you always deaf?" Lola read the words slowly. Then she reached for the pen. "Fever took it. I was 8. One night I could hear Mama singing. By morning, nothing. Silence stayed. Everyone thought it was a curse." Jude swallowed hard. And the drum. The drum gave me a voice when people stopped listening. I feel every beat. That's how I speak now. With my hands. With rhythm. They sat in silence again. Jude didn't want to pity her, she would hate that. But he couldn't help feeling something swell in his chest. Not sorrow, exactly. Something deeper. Admiration. Connection. A sense that the universe had led him to her for a reason. After a while, he wrote again. I used to create things that spoke to millions. Now, I barely know what my own soul is saying. Lola smiled, then signed something slowly, clearly. He didn't understand, but she pointed at his chest, then hers, then tapped the drum between them. It didn't need translation. That night, they didn't play music. They just sat there, listening to the language of fireflies, of breath, of presence. And in the quiet, Jude's heart began to confess things even he hadn't known it was holding. The entire village buzzed with excitement. Bright fabrics fluttered from windows, children rehearsed dance steps in open courtyards, and the aroma of roasted maize drifted through the air. Ayatoro's annual yam festival was approaching, and for the villagers, it was more than a celebration of harvest, it was a reunion of generations, a sacred honoring of tradition. Even Jude, now fondly referred to as thrummed, felt the anticipation ripple through the community like a steady drumbeat. Lola was at the center of it all. She was to lead the festival's drum procession, an honor she had held for 3 years now. The children practiced their choreography under her guidance, mimicking her moves with youthful glee. She radiated calm energy, even when a few of the younger ones mixed up their steps or missed the beat. Jude watched her from a distance, captivated by how easily she carried the weight of expectation without saying a word. Later that evening, as they walked back from rehearsal, Lola handed him a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and read, I want you to join us in the procession. His eyes widened. He looked at her, unsure if she was joking. Me? I'm not ready for that, he scribbled back. I ruined the entire rhythm. She laughed silently, the kind of laugh that made her shoulders shake and her eyes squint. Then she took the paper and wrote underneath, you won't ruin it. You'll find it. The drum will tell you. That night, Jude practiced harder than he ever had. Alone in his bungalow, hands sore and echoing with beats that were more emotion than technique, he finally understood, this wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. About showing up. And for the first time, he wanted to be seen. Festival day dawned with the sun painting golden streaks across the sky. The entire village shimmered in color, women in bold Ankara prints, men in abbadas dusted with fine embroidery, and children in matching outfits that made them look like a rainbow spilled over the earth. Music played from every direction, flutes, shakirs, and most of all, drums. Always the drums. Jude stood nervously behind the community center, adjusting the red sash tied around his waist, the same one Lola had given him to wear. His hands trembled, not from fear of drumming, but from the unexpected weight of meaning this day had taken on. He had never performed in public. Back in Lagos, he had addressed rooms of investors, lectured at conferences, and appeared on television. But this was different. This wasn't about image. This was about belonging. Lola approached him in full festival regalia, her braids adorned with tiny cowries, her wrapper patterned with tribal drums, and her face glowing with pride. She placed a hand on his shoulder, met his eyes, and nodded. No words. No writing. Just understanding. When the procession began, the crowd parted. The children led with their routine, feet kicking sand into the air. The drummers followed. Jude, to his surprise, didn't fumble. His hands remembered the rhythms Lola had taught him. And more than that, he felt them. Every strike of the drum connected him to the earth, the people, to Lola. The beat wasn't perfect, but it was alive. As the crowd clapped and cheered, Jude looked up to find Lola watching him. She signed something quickly, but he didn't need to ask what it meant. He understood it in the way her smile lingered and her eyes glistened. That day, two hearts beat in sync, and the whole village heard it. In the days after the festival, something shifted between Jude and Lola. They still met under the tree by the stream, still shared conversations written on paper or spoken through signs and glances, but there was a new rhythm now, gentler, deeper, unspoken. They didn't need to fill every silence. Being near each other had become its own language. One afternoon, they visited the old part of the village where the elders lived. The homes were built with thick red clay, and baobab trees cast white shadows across the courtyards. Lola had promised to help repair a cracked drum used for ancestral ceremonies, and she invited Jude to come along. As she walked, delicately stretching new hide over the frame, one of the elders, a wiry man with knowing eyes, approached Jude. "You are not who you say you are," the man said quietly, his voice low and direct. Jude froze, but said nothing. The elder continued. "You're hiding from something. But your spirit is loud." And he nodded toward Lola, "She hears things others miss. She sees people for who they are." Jude felt exposed, like someone had pulled a veil off his soul. The man patted his shoulder and walked away, leaving Jude sitting in stunned silence. Lola looked over and signed something. He shook his head, smiling faintly, and scribbled in the notebook, "That elder has eyes like X-ray." Lola chuckled and replied on the next page, "That's why he sees you so clearly." That night, as Jude lay in bed, the elder's words echoed in his mind. Lola didn't just listen with her body, she listened with her soul. And the more time he spent around her, the more he felt like his own truth was rising, quietly but steadily, to the surface. The next morning, a soft drizzle blanketed the village, turning red earth to dark clay and sending the children into bouts of laughter as they danced barefoot in the rain. Jude stood by his window, watching the scene unfold, but his mind was elsewhere. The elder's words had struck deeper than he admitted, even to himself. He had buried Jude Ogumbanwo under the name thrummed, believing it was for peace. But peace without truth, he was beginning to realize, was just another kind of prison. He walked to Lola's house, an old bungalow nestled between tall pawpaw trees. She was outside, gathering rainwater into a plastic basin. When she saw him, she smiled and waved him in. They sat under the corrugated roof shade as the rain drummed softly above them. He brought out the notepad, hesitated, then began to write slowly. "I haven't told you the whole truth about who I am." Lola's brows rose, but she didn't interrupt. "My real name is Jude Ogumbanwo. I built a tech company in Lagos. I was rich, famous, exhausted. I came here to disappear. I needed silence so badly, I pretended to be someone else." He handed her the paper and looked away, unsure what to expect. Anger. Disappointment. Betrayal. Lola read slowly. Then she tore a new page from the notebook and wrote carefully. "So, you were always loud. Just in the wrong way." Jude let out a soft laugh, part relief, part disbelief. She didn't seem angry. She wasn't afraid of who he was. She didn't ask for his past. All she wanted was his presence. "Are you going back?" she asked on the next page. He stared at her, unsure. "I don't know," he whispered aloud. And for the first time, the words didn't echo, they simply settled. 3 days after his confession, Jude received a surprise visitor. He had just returned from the school, chalk dust on his jeans from helping paint the classroom walls, when he saw a sleek black SUV parked awkwardly near his bungalow. The car looked as out of place in Ayatoro as a gold necklace on a scarecrow. Standing beside it was a tall man in a navy blue suit, squinting into the sunlight. It was Deji, Jude's former assistant and one of the few people who still had his real location. He looked both relieved and annoyed. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks," Deji said, stepping forward. What are you doing out here, man? You disappeared after the board fallout. People are worried. Jude wiped his hands on a towel and gestured toward the house. I needed time. Space. I didn't come here to be found. Deji entered reluctantly, looking around the humble room. You're Jude Ogumbanwo, he said with exasperation. You built one of the biggest tech empires in West Africa. And you're hiding out here. Teaching kids how to paint walls. Jude poured him a drink and sat across from him. You wouldn't understand, Deji. Out there, I was drowning in expectation. Here. I'm learning to breathe again. As they spoke, a soft knock came at the door. Lola entered carrying a small basket of garden eggs and mangoes. She paused at the sight of Deji, her expression unreadable. Jude stood quickly. Lola, this is Deji, an old colleague. She gave a polite nod, then handed Jude the basket and signed, I'll come back later. No, Jude said gently. Stay. Deji stared at her, then looked at Jude. She's deaf. Yes, Jude said with quiet pride. And the reason I remembered how to feel. Deji stayed for 2 days, though reluctantly. He couldn't understand the appeal of the village, no internet, no press, no smart screens, not even a functioning coffee machine. This place is the opposite of innovation, he muttered once as he swatted away mosquitoes. But Jude noticed something. While Deji complained constantly, he didn't leave right away. He asked questions about Lola. He watched the evening drumming sessions. And though he never said it aloud, something in him softened too. On the second evening, they sat by the fire behind Jude's bungalow, with Lola drumming quietly nearby. The beat was slow and low, like a whisper to the soul. Deji stared into the flames before turning to Jude. Do you really think you can stay here forever? He asked. Jude didn't answer immediately. He looked at Lola, her hands moving with gentle grace, eyes half closed in concentration. She wasn't just playing music. She was speaking. Healing. I don't know about forever, Jude finally said. But for the first time in years, I'm not rushing to be anywhere else. Deji shook his head but smiled. You've changed. You're calmer. Like. I don't know. Like you found something people spend billions chasing. Lola stopped drumming and looked over. She signed something, and Jude translated softly. She says we all carry 2 rhythms, one the world hears, and one only our heart does. We forget the second when we chase noise. Deji looked at her in awe. She said that. Jude nodded. She lives it. As the fire crackled and night deepened, the 3 of them sat together in silence. Different words, different languages, but bound, for a moment, by something beyond words. And for Jude, that night proved what he already knew: peace wasn't a place. It was a person. The next morning, Deji prepared to leave. The SUV's engine rumbled softly as villagers glanced curiously at the sleek vehicle. Jude walked him to the edge of the road, past the market stalls and the group of children practicing drumming with Lola in the distance. Deji looked around one last time, his expression conflicted. You know they're talking back in Lagos, he said, pulling his sunglasses from his shirt pocket. Investors are jittery. Your name is still strong, but, without you at the helm, the company's losing its rhythm. Jude nodded. Maybe it needs a different rhythm now. Deji hesitated. You're serious about staying here? I'm serious about not being who I used to be. Deji gave a dry chuckle. Well, if you change your mind, there's always room for you back in the chaos. They embraced briefly, and then Deji got into the car. As the SUV disappeared down the dusty road, Jude felt the final tie to his former world stretched thinner. Not broken. Just quieter. Later that afternoon, he returned to the stream and found Lola skipping stones across the water. She glanced up at him with a knowing smile. He sat beside her, picking up a stone and tossing it lazily. It sank without a splash. She handed him another and showed him how to angle it better. The next stone skipped, twice, before sinking. He grinned. He wrote, "My friend left today. He wanted me to come back with him." Lola read it, her face calm. She didn't ask what he decided. Instead, she wrote, "And did you find your answer in the water?" Jude looked at the stream, the ripples fading. He nodded. "I'm still skipping. Still learning. But I'm not sinking anymore." And for Lola, that answer was enough. Over the following weeks, the rhythm between Jude and Lola deepened. Their days blended into routines filled with gentle smiles, thoughtful silences, shared drumming lessons, and long walks through fields blooming with yellow hibiscus. Every so often, Lola would ask questions on paper, and Jude would answer with more honesty than he ever had in boardrooms or therapy sessions. There was no judgment in her eyes, only curiosity and calm understanding. One warm evening, they visited the hill that overlooked the village. It was Lola's favorite spot, quiet, breezy, scattered with tall grass and old trees that had seen many seasons. She brought a small drum, he brought oranges, and together they watched the sun dip behind the far-off hills. As the sky turned gold, Lola reached into her bag and pulled out something Jude hadn't seen before, a smaller, hand-carved drum shaped like a heart, no larger than her palm. She passed it to him without a word. He turned it over gently in his hands. On the base, he noticed faint etchings in Yoruba, Ebenuj enai orantia opoda siao, sorrow is a song that returns as joy. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. She took the notepad and wrote carefully, "That was my mother's drum. I saved it when the house burned." Jude swallowed hard. The past was never far, even for someone like Lola who didn't speak it aloud. He placed the drum on the ground between them, then took the pen and wrote, "Do you ever get tired of being strong all the time?" Lola stared at the words, then shook her head slowly. She tapped her chest and wrote, "The strength is real. But so is the loneliness." Jude didn't respond in writing this time. Instead, he reached across the space and gently held her hand. No words. No need. After that moment on the hill, something fragile yet undeniable began to grow between them. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't labeled. But it was there, in the way Lola looked at him longer now before signing, or how Jude would pause mid-task just to admire her focus. There was a tenderness to their silences now, like music softening just before a crescendo. But peace, Jude had learned, often comes with shadows. One afternoon, while helping the children rehearse a new rhythm for an upcoming event, Jude noticed a stranger near the school gate. The man was snapping photos with his phone, ducking behind trees, clearly trying not to be seen. Jude's instincts, honed by years of media scrutiny, kicked in instantly. He approached the man, who quickly turned and walked away. That night, Jude couldn't sleep. He paced the floor of his bungalow, questions rattling in his head like loose bolts. Had someone sent a journalist? Was Deji's visit followed by curiosity from the outside world? Had his disappearance finally become a story too big to ignore? He didn't tell Lola immediately. He didn't want to disrupt the peace they had built. But he grew quieter over the next few days. More guarded. More distant. Lola noticed. She always noticed. One evening, after a long walk, she handed him the notepad. "You're pulling away." "Why?" Jude hesitated, then wrote, "I think someone from the media found me. They may come back. I don't want you caught in that storm." Lola read his words and stared at him for a long moment. Then she wrote, "Storms come. But I don't run from rain. Especially not when I've already heard your silence." The words hit Jude with unexpected force. She wasn't afraid of his word. But was he? 2 days later, the peaceful rhythm of Ayatoro was broken by the sudden arrival of a well-dressed woman. She stepped lightly through the dusty streets, her heels clicking softly, eyes sharp and searching. Word spread quickly, a journalist from Lagos, determined to find the mysterious man hiding in the village. Jude first saw her at the market. She introduced herself as Ada, a reporter known for telling stories that went beyond headlines. She wasn't there to expose or exploit, she said, but to understand. Jude, wary but intrigued, agreed to meet her under the old baobab tree at dusk. Ada asked questions about his past, his reasons for retreat, and about Lola. Jude answered cautiously but honestly, surprised by how her presence didn't unsettle him as much as he expected. Ada was fascinated by Lola's story, her strength, and her music. She even tried to learn some signs, laughing when she got them wrong. That evening, as Jude returned home, Lola watched from the veranda. He told her about Ada's visit, and she nodded, signing, "People will come and go, but your beat is yours alone." Jude felt the weight of those words. His past was not something he could hide forever. But here, in the quiet village, he had found a new rhythm. One that he wanted to protect. Ada's visit stirred the village. Some whispered excitement, others weariness. But Lola remained steady, her drums beating a steady pulse that seemed to calm the unsettled air. Jude found himself caught between two worlds, the one he'd left and the one he was learning to call home. One afternoon, Ada asked if she could film a session with Lola and the children. Jude hesitated but saw the joy in Lola's eyes when she agreed. The cameras rolled as Lola taught rhythms, laughed with the children, and sang stories that words couldn't capture. Jude watched, heart swelling. This was more than a story, it was a lifeline. That night, Jude confessed something he hadn't told anyone: "I'm scared." Lola read it and touched his hand. She signed, "Courage isn't absence of fear, but moving despite it." Her words grounded him. He realized that the beat he'd lost wasn't gone, it had just been buried beneath layers of doubt and expectation. Now, with Lola's rhythm guiding him, he could face whatever came next. The days grew shorter as the rainy season approached, painting the village in lush greens and fresh earth. Jude found himself at a crossroads. Ada's presence meant his story was no longer a secret. Lagos called him back with open arms, new investors, media attention, and the familiar rush of the tech world. Yet here, amidst the steady drumbeats and whispering trees, lay a life unmarked by deadlines or facades. One afternoon, Lola took him to a quiet spot by the riverbank. She handed him her small, carved drum and sang softly, "Choose the beat that feeds your soul." Jude held the drum, feeling the carved edges under his fingers. He thought of his old life, power suits, skyscrapers, endless noise. Then he thought of Lola, the silence in her smile, the strength in her hands, the music in her heart. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "I don't know what the future holds. But I know I want to live a life that feels real." Lola nodded, her eyes shining in the lamplight. Together, they faced the unknown, ready to write a new rhythm, one beat at a time. The village school was bustling with activity as children prepared for the upcoming cultural showcase. Jude found himself more involved than ever, painting walls, organizing supplies, even helping Lola repair worn-out drums. His hands, once accustomed only to keyboards and touchscreen taps, grew calloused and strong in new ways. One afternoon, an elderly woman approached him at the schoolyard. She introduced herself as Mama Busy, the village healer. She had heard of Jude's arrival and wanted to offer a gift, a small pouch filled with herbs and roots, meant to bring clarity and peace. Jude accepted the gift with gratitude. "Thank you," he said softly. Mama Busy smiled warmly. "This land heals those who listen. And those who have been hurt." Jude looked at the pouch, then at the children laughing nearby. For the first time, he felt like he was truly part of something larger, a community woven not from wealth or fame, but from shared stories and healing hearts. That evening, he placed the pouch by his bedside, a quiet promise to himself to keep growing, keep healing. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Lola invited Jude to her family compound. The air was thick with the scent of cooking yam and fresh earth. Inside, the walls were decorated with colorful fabrics and old photographs, images of ancestors whose eyes seemed to watch over the present. Lola led Jude to a small room where an old radio sat, cracked and silent. She pointed to it, then to her ears, and signed, "I used to listen to music here." Jude nodded, feeling a pang of sorrow. She had lost her hearing so young, yet her spirit danced with every beat. Lola picked up a wooden shaker and began to move it rhythmically. The sound was soft but vibrant, filling the room with life. Jude watched, mesmerized. Then, without thinking, he picked up a small drum and joined her. Their rhythms intertwined, silent yet full of meaning. It was a conversation without words, a silent song that spoke of loss, resilience, and hope. In that moment, Jude understood that music wasn't just sound, it was connection. It was heartbeats meeting across silence. The next morning, Jude awoke to the distant sound of drums echoing through the village. It was a new rhythm, unfamiliar but inviting. Curious, he followed the beat to the village square where a gathering had formed. The elders were seated in a circle, and in the center stood a tall, weathered man with a drum that seemed older than time. Lola approached the circle, her face glowing with respect. She signed to Jude, "This is Baba Ade, the keeper of stories and songs." Baba Ade looked up and smiled warmly at Jude. Without a word, he handed Jude a small, carved flute. "The village has accepted you," Lola signed. "Now, you must learn to listen, not just with ears, but with your heart." Jude took the flute hesitantly and raised it to his lips. The first notes were shaky and uncertain, but Baba Ade encouraged him gently. As the sun rose higher, the flute's melody grew stronger, weaving into the drums and voices around him. For the first time, Jude felt fully part of the village, not as an outsider, but as a son of its rhythm and soul. Days passed, and Jude found comfort in the village's simple rhythms. One morning, Lola took him to a quiet hill overlooking the sprawling fields below. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying stories from far and near. She signed, "The wind carries memories." Jude closed his eyes and felt the breeze on his face. He thought about his past, the skyscrapers, the boardrooms, the endless noise, and the peace he had found here. The wind seemed to carry away his regrets and fears, replacing them with hope. Lola pulled a small cloth from her bag and handed it to him. It was embroidered with symbols he didn't recognize but felt somehow familiar. She wrote on the notepad, "This is a gift from my mother. It means new beginnings." Jude smiled, touched by the gesture. He wrapped the cloth around his wrist, feeling the weight of the village's history and the promise of his own future intertwined. Together, they watched the horizon, ready to face whatever stories the wind would bring next. Despite the peace Ayatoro offered, shadows from Jude's past began to creep in. One evening, while working late on a letter to Ada, he noticed the flicker of headlights on the dirt road. A familiar car, a sleek, black sedan, rode into the village, stirring whispers among the villagers. Deji had returned, but this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him was a sharp-suited woman Jude hadn't met before, an investor eager to discuss the company's future. Jude felt the old anxiety rise like a tide. The world he had tried to leave behind was pulling him back, promising success but threatening to swallow the new life he was building. Later that night, he confided in Lola, writing, "They want me back. But I'm afraid the price will be too high." Lola signed thoughtfully, "Sometimes the hardest bit to keep is the one inside your own heart." Jude nodded. The choice was becoming clearer, but no less difficult. Jude sat by the stream, the water's gentle flow mirroring the turbulence inside him. The offer from the investors lay heavy on his mind, a chance to reclaim his empire, wealth, and influence. But at what cost? He had found something precious here, simplicity, connection, and a sense of purpose that no boardroom could offer. Lola joined him silently, handing over a fresh piece of paper. She wrote, "What does your heart say?" He looked into her calm eyes, feeling the weight of her question. Connect the village to the world, spreading the message of balance and resilience. Lola's mother passed peacefully, surrounded by family. The loss was heavy, but healing ceremonies brought closure. The village came together in song and silence to honor her life. In the wake of grief, Jude and Lola focused on preserving memories. They recorded stories, songs, and histories to pass to future generations, ensuring the past remained alive. Political changes in the region threatened funding for local projects. Jude used his connections to advocate for the village, navigating new challenges with calm determination. The village united against external pressures, organizing festivals and campaigns celebrating their culture and resilience. Jude and Lola led with passion and humility. The community center marked its 5th anniversary with a grand celebration. Villagers shared stories of growth, transformation, and hope. Jude and Lola looked on proudly at the lives they had touched. Ayadil, now a confident young boy, performed with his own drum group at the anniversary. Watching him, Jude and Lola felt the future was bright, full of promise and rhythm. Despite busyness, Jude and Lola cherished quiet mornings with tea under their favorite tree. These moments grounded them, reminding them of the journey that had brought them here. Jude began writing a book about his transformation, an honest story of loss, rediscovery, and love. Lola contributed poems and songs, creating a rich tapestry of voices. Inspired by their journey, they launched a foundation to support deaf children and rural education across Nigeria. Their vision expanded beyond Ayatoro, touching lives far and wide. Years later, Jude sat beside Lola, watching Ayadil lead a drum circle of children laughing and dancing. The sun set in hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows and golden light. The village thrived, a living rhythm of love, resilience, and hope. Jude smiled and signed to Lola, "Our beat goes on." She smiled back, tapping the drum softly. Together, their hearts continued the endless song.